Welcome to Ouch. Was that a ghost? This podcast may contain graphic material, which some listeners may find disturbing. Listener discretion is advised.
Help me.
Now that we covered that, here's your host, Liz.
Welcome back to Ouch, Was That a Ghost? This week I am covering Dorothea Puente, aka the Death House Landlady. She earned this nickname by playing into this trustworthy, unassuming, elderly woman facade. She seemed to be a master manipulator from a very young age, and she would go on to target those who were most vulnerable, like the homeless or those that were struggling with substance abuse problems, people dealing with mental health issues, or the elderly. She ran an unlicensed boarding house where she would gain trust of the locals in the community and of social workers that would actually help place residents in her care. Once there, some of them were drugged to the point of overdose, and she would go on to forge and cash many Social Security, pension, whatever benefit checks. And some of these checks were cashed long after the intended recipient of the checks were deceased. Dorothea was born Dorothea Helen Gray on January 9th, 1929 in Redlands, California, to parents Trudy May and Jesse James Gray. Dorothea had a really rough childhood. She was the sixth of 7 children, although throughout her life, she would say that she had many more siblings. You'll see that this is a common thing with her, that she exaggerates or tells stories. Both of her parents were alcoholics. Her father would often threaten to commit suicide in front of his children. He never did, but he did end up dying of tuberculosis in 1937, when Dorothea was only 8 years old. Trudy May, Dorothea's mother, lost custody of the children the next year. I don't know if it was better or worse that she did, because Trudy was also said to have been very abusive, or she would just be gone for days at a time, maybe because of her job as a sex worker, or maybe due to her drinking binges. After losing custody of the children, Trudy May tragically died in a motorcycle accident, so Dorothea was orphaned by the age of 9 years old. I mean, this girl went through all this abuse and then lost both of her parents by the time she was 9. The children were shuffled between relatives and foster homes, where Dorothea didn't have it any easier. It's speculated that while in the system, she may have been sexually abused as well. In 1945, Dorothea, now 16 years old, left the orphanage and moved to Washington. She began working as a sex worker, and she started telling everybody that her name was Sherry, and I don't know, she made up where she was born, how many siblings she had, but who knows, maybe after everything she went through, she wanted to make this a fresh start. But like I said, this would be a running theme throughout her life. She would say she was a nurse at one point, never having gone to nursing school, or that she was a doctor, same thing, no schooling, or an actress, or have all these amazing contacts, friends with all these powerful people. While in Washington, she met a soldier named Fred McFall. The 22-year-old soldier had just returned from fighting, and the two were married. They moved to Nevada. They went on to have 2 daughters, one in 1946 and another within a year. And they lived happily ever after at the end. No, just kidding. Dorothea sent one of the children to go live with relatives in Sacramento, and she put the other one up for adoption. She was pregnant another time, but had a miscarriage. And I guess later, when Dorothea was interviewed by Sacktown magazine, she told them that she also had twins that committed suicide, but I'm not sure. She seems to tell a lot of stories, so it's hard to believe anything that's not verifiable. And she wouldn't go into details with the magazine about who the father of the children were, or when they were born, or when they died, or where. I don't know. But Dorothea and Fred McFall divorced in 1948 after he just left Dorothea. That same year, Dorothea moved to San Bernardino, where she told everyone that she was a widow. So now she's a single woman, or a widow, as she would say. She needed to support herself, so she went back to working as a sex worker. But this is when she had her first run-in with the law. The now 19-year-old Dorothea was arrested for forging checks. She pled guilty to the 2 counts, and she was sentenced to 1 year. She only ended up serving about 4 months, and she was put on probation. She ignored her probation that told that she had to stay in the area, and she just left to San Francisco. Then in 1952, the 24-year-old Dorothea married a sea merchant named Axel Brennan Johansson. Dorothea introduced herself to him as Thea Singoelia Nayarda, and she continued with this ruse with him, with this alter ego. She said she was from Israeli and Egyptian descent, and she was a Muslim woman. Even with this fake persona, the marriage was a hot mess. And while Axel was away on sea merchant voyages, trips, or whatever sea merchants do, Thea, or Dorothea, would have all these dudes over, and she would spend and gamble away all of his money. And Dorothea also opened a little business, a bookkeeping service at a place she rented out. But it didn't last too long. When the landlord noticed the amount of foot traffic coming in and out of the business, he called the police to investigate, which led to Dorothea, now 31, being arrested again, this time in Sacramento for running a bookkeeping service that was actually a front for a brothel. And she was given 90 days. The next year, Dorothea was committed to DeWitt State Hospital. There she was diagnosed as having an unstable personality and being a pathological liar. Needless to say, her and Axel's marriage didn't last, and they ended up divorcing in 1966. But she kept using his last name and decided to go by Sharon Johansson. And this character's backstory was that she was a good Christian woman who was caring and helped young women. Sharon now, was just a caring, trustworthy person. She started working as some sort of home health aide, like a nurse, but with no training. So she would go around and do in-home caregiving stuff, like cleaning up, giving medication, helping them bathe, things like that. And in 1968, Dorothea got married again. So we're at husband number 3 now, and this time it's to Roberto Jose Puente. This time she was the elder in the relationship by a significant amount, 16 years or something. And I've seen speculated that this marriage was purely for papers because Roberto was born in Mexico, but I'm not really sure. The couple separated after about 1.5 years. Dorothea said that he was very abusive, and she tried to serve Roberto with divorce papers, but he just went to Mexico. Again, another hot mess of a marriage. There were restraining orders, fightings, and eventually they did divorce. But she would continue using his last name for over 20 years. So now the divorce is behind her, and in 1968, Dorothea started running an unlicensed boarding house in Sacramento. This was at 2100 F Street. The building had a bunch of bedrooms, and she could stay on the top floor and rent out the other bedrooms. One floor had all single rooms for those that could pay more, and the bottom floor was rooms separated by curtains. She would offer to help those that were struggling with mental health, homelessness, or alcoholism, and she would also host AA meetings. She connected with the Hispanic community, reaching out to them, making this trustworthy image of herself. She would even help people that would stay with her sign up for Social Security or other benefits. And if you wanted to stay at her house, you just had to sign your check over to Dorothea, and she would give you allowances. She was donating to the right people in town, politicians, putting herself out there in the community. Just this, woman that really, really cares. She became friendly with social workers in the area that saw Dorothea as this caring human. She would really go out of her way to help the elderly and others that were struggling. And they would suggest that boarders that had nowhere else to go would stay with her. They were like, hey, this nice woman rents rooms. And in 1976, Dorothea married again to Pedro Angel Montalvo. I don't know. So number 4. And after a few weeks, he just, left. So Dorothea just kept on running this house And Dorothea is just getting this check money, giving out allowances. And if the person didn't sign them over to Dorothea, sometimes she would just forge the checks herself and sign them over to herself. But people started noticing around this time that a lot of valuables were starting to go missing. And after multiple reports have made their way to the police, they looked into her a little bit and they found that Dorothea was cashing other people's benefit checks. She ended up being arrested, and in 1978, Dorothea was convicted of cashing 34 checks of her tenants. And she got 5 years of federal probation, which this was for over $4,000 worth of checks. And that's crazy that 0 jail time for $4,000, but okay. And she was forbidden from running a boarding house, but she doesn't learn. This is when her look started to change. Dorothea started dressing more conservative, making herself look older. And she would lie about how old she was. She began wearing these oversized round glasses. She let her hair go gray. She stopped dyeing it. She took on this role, I guess now, as an unassuming grandmotherly figure. She found a job doing in-home caregiver work, and quickly the clients started noticing things missing around their houses. But remember, these are people that needed care, some with dementia, so she would play into that, like, oh my goodness, you must have forgotten. And she managed to wiggle out of a lot of the accusations. Because remember, she's just like this poor little old lady now. One of Dorothea's clients that she took care of, this elderly woman, would get worse after Dorothea's visits. The doctors, over time, did realize that something was off about this, and they ended up doing a toxicology test, and it showed a high level of medication that was not prescribed to her, but was prescribed to Dorothea. Police were notified, but nothing was done due to lack of evidence, and Dorothea was just fired. In January of 1982, Dorothea met 74-year-old Malcolm Mackenzie at a bar. They hit it off, and it led to the two of them going back to Malcolm's apartment. On the way back to the apartment, Malcolm started feeling really off, like really lethargic. And this was because Dorothea at some point slipped something into his drink. And once Malcolm was so incapacitated in his apartment he could no longer move, her plan took action. But he was stuck in this state where he could see what she was doing, but he just couldn't move. She found a suitcase in his apartment and just started filling it up. She filled it up with his coin collection, some jewelry. And to top it all off, before she left, she went over and pulled a diamond ring off of his finger, while he could see what was happening but couldn't move. And she took off with her suitcase full of stolen goods. Once the drug wore off, Malcolm contacted the police and gave the name that she gave him at the bar, Dorothea Puente. Like, she didn't even use an alias, which that's very odd. In April 1982, Dorothea had become friends with 61-year-old Ruth Monroe, and they decided to go into business together, as Ruth had recently lost her husband, and Dorothea was trying to figure out her next move. They made this business plan. They opened a joint bank account where Ruth added some money to start the company, and Ruth ended up moving in with Dorothea. But soon after she started living with Dorothea, she started looking worse and worse and becoming more lethargic. And within weeks, she told another friend, quote, "I'm so sick, I feel like I'm going to die." At one point, Ruth's son stopped by to see her and found her drinking alcohol, which was very strange for her. It's just like completely out of character. And I think I saw in one article that she was actually allergic to alcohol. And within a few days, Ruth was found deceased due to an overdose of codeine, originally thought to be accidental or possibly even suicide, because Dorothea told the police how depressed Ruth was. Her kids thought this was very strange because Ruth was not prescribed codeine, but there was no proof to suggest it was anything but an accident or an intentional overdose. Needless to say, Dorothea emptied the bank account. In May of 1982, Dorothea went by 49-year-old Dorothy Osborne's house. While she was there, Dorothea made Dorothy, I know that's very confusing, Dorothy. I'll just call her Puente for this. Puente made Dorothy a drink, and hours later, Dorothy woke up and found that her credit cards, checks, and other items were missing, and so was Puente. Once she kind of got her bearings about her again, she was like, I got robbed. So she called the police, and the authorities found this cup with some powder residue next to it. And Puente was picked up a few days later with some of Dorothy's stuff on her. So she was detained, and her day in court finally came for when she drugged and robbed Malcolm Mackenzie and what just happened with Dorothy Osborne. So in July of 1982, Dorothea was sentenced to 5 years, but she would only serve half of that, and she was given state parole until March 21st, 1986. And her federal parole was extended until 1990, again not allowed to run a boarding house. While she was incarcerated, she was diagnosed by a state psychologist as being schizophrenic, that she should not work in any type of medical field work, but you'll see in part 2, these parameters were never checked. Well, thank you everybody so much for listening. Till next time, bye.
Thank you for listening. If you need more content or just want to help support the podcast, head on over to patreon.com and search Ouch, Was That a Ghost? If you need some snazzy merch, you can find it at crowdmade.com by searching Ouch, Was That a Ghost? If you have a story you'd like to share, you can email it to ouchwasthataghost@yahoo.com. You can also find us on Facebook and all the other social media platforms under Ouch, Was That a Ghost?
Help me.
All links can also be found on ouchwasthataghost.com.